to my dear friend, Ralph. They tell a story about a bar mitzvah boy who wanted to deliver a beautiful speech at his bar mitzvah. Am I hearing a double voice? No? Okay. So he comes to his mother and says, Mom, I would love to talk at my bar mitzvah about where we come from. So Mom says, of course, our family ancestry is prestigious. And she begins to wax eloquent about their lineage. He says, no, Mom, all the way in the beginning. Back to the beginning. Where do we come from? She says, in the beginning, God created heaven and earth. On the sixth day, he created Adam and Eve. For whatever reason, they decided to have kids. I don't know why. Then you have Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, Leah. And here we are, 5,784 years later. Okay. Puts it down in his little notebook or in his tablet, comes to Dad. Dad is a very proud graduate of Columbia University. Says, Dad, I want to talk about our lineage, where we come from. So Dad talks about his grandpa and his grandma and his great-grandparents. No, Dad. All the way back. Where do we come from? How did it begin? Dad says we have evolved over billions of years. We have evolved from chimps and apes and monkeys. And what about they? They have evolved from other primates. And Dad goes back to 26.3 billion years of Big Bang. And where does it all begin? It begins with helium, gas, bacteria. Okay, puts it down on his tablet. Comes back to his mother. Says, Mom, I'm very confused about my bar mitzvah speech. You see, you tell me we come from Abraham, Sarah, Adam, Eve, God. Dad tells me we come from monkeys, chimps, apes, gas, bacteria. What should I say at the bar mitzvah? Where do we come from? Mom looks at her son and says, my dear boy, there's no contradiction. Your father was talking about his side of the family. Yeah. I'm talking about my side of the family. It's an old and good Jewish joke. But somehow this week, this joke came back into my mind because I realized that America is at a crossroads. And we're going to have to choose which side of the family we want to identify with most. We each have two sides in every family. We don't have a mono brain. We have complex brains and psyches. But I think there comes a moment in a nation's history when a people is challenged to make choices that under ordinary times maybe it can evade or it can be ambiguous about. And I want to say I get invited to many events, corporate events, universities, synagogues, centers, different types of lectures. And very often, people just want me to say things that everybody will like, which means nothing. Just be parv. When I spoke to Ralph this week, he said, I want you to say something that matters, something that's meaningful. We're living in serious, intense times. Say something that's significant. I said, but then I have to be authentic and tell people what I really feel. He says, go ahead. I appreciated that. And I thought if that's how he runs Inspire, it's inspiring. It's inspiring because we often live in a climate and a culture where not only, I understand that you don't have to believe what I have to believe. You don't have to. But when people are afraid of saying what they believe, then there's no authenticity, there's no integrity. There was once a history professor here in the United States, and he opens one class lecture to his classroom, high school kids. And he turns to the girls and the boys and he says, can anyone tell me when and who said the following statement? Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. Who said it and when? Very good. You got an extra pina colada. Very good. You know the day too? But those boys and girls shrug their shoulders in ignorance, like that guy. They're like, I don't know. It's before Google, so nobody can Google it. One boy from Japan knew the answer. He came from Tokyo to study in the States, and he says, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, January 22nd, 1961, during his inauguration address, it was raining in Washington that day. He did it in a Japanese accent. The teacher was so impressed, but he was so annoyed with the American kids. He's like, you American boys and girls, you're a bunch of spoiled brats, lazy good-for-nothings, narcissistic, self-centered kids who know nothing about our leaders, about our visions, about our ideals, about our history, about our heritage, about our dreams. You're all addicted to your iPhones, to your iPods, to your iPads, and everything by you is iPhone, iPod, iPad. And even when you have a game called Wii, you spell it with 2 I's. I. We have to learn from the Japanese. Here's a kid who comes from a foreign culture and civilization. He didn't know about bell works. And he comes here and he knows what Kennedy said and when he said it. And for 20 minutes, this teacher waxes eloquent about the virtues of the Japanese. Not only Japanese food, Japanese ambiance, Japanese atmosphere, Japanese culture, Japanese etiquette. Until, and you forgive me, folks, I like telling stories the way they happen, until there's a voice from the back of the classroom. The hell with the Japanese! The teacher was dumbfounded. 20 years he was teaching. Nobody ever spoke to him this way. He screams out, who said that? The boy says, Harry Truman, 1945. I think... You know, people wake up in the morning. People wake up in the morning and they have a choice. I could say the hell with the Japs or the hell with this one or the hell with that one. Or I can wake up and ask not what my country can do for me, what I can do for my country, what my spouse, my wife can do for me, but what I can do for my wife. Make sure you tell that to her, Ralph. Not only what my community can do for me, what I can do for my community. And not only what God can do for me, but what I can do for God. And I'm inspired to be in the presence of Ralph and your wife and your beautiful family and all your friends here. Part of a company that its leaders, all the way from the top, inspire integrity and friendship and commitment to a larger cause. Because we all wake up in the morning and yeah, we want to know what people can do for us. But I know Ralph and his colleagues wake up in the morning and also ask, what can we do for God, for his world, for our people, for humanity, for the planet? And it's at such a moment when we face a crossroad that is fateful. Because the world was stunned this past Saturday, 6:13 p.m., when a young 20-year-old, in Yiddish they call him a pisher. I don't know how you say that in Japanese. How do you say that in English? A baby, a 20-year-old baby. Thomas Matthew Crooks takes 5 shots, murders 1 person, critically wounds 2 others in an assassination attempt on the former president and president candidate Donald Trump. Everybody was stunned and overwhelmed, first of all, from a security perspective, just a few hundred feet away. The Secret Service was warned. The police was warned. You know, that's obviously a major part of the story. Obviously, the loss of life of a good man trying to protect his children and his family while shot down, of those wounded, but also of the story in and of itself. What motivates a 20-year-old boy to do such a thing, to do such an act? I found myself thinking, would I ever want to kill somebody? I mean, we all want to kill somebody. You know what I mean? You know, like drop dead, whatever. But usually it's how far it goes, and then you go to therapy for a couple of years to deal with your anxiety and anger management. You know, and I asked myself, why wouldn't I kill somebody, even if I vehemently disagree? Okay, so thank God I don't really have anybody mamish to kill, you know. But what really stops? You know, we often say it's probably insanity. The person is demented, psychotic or some other mental illness. It's a very easy explanation, but it's a cheap shot because so many murders and so many murders in schools in recent years happen by people who you can't call insane. And let's even talk about people who are mentally challenged. I know in my community, in my extended family and community, a lot of people who are mentally challenged, but they would never even entertain the idea of taking a gun and trying to murder somebody, even somebody you loathe, somebody you disagree with, somebody you hate, somebody you feel should certainly not be in the position that they crave to be. And this comes down to one of the deepest questions in life, morality. What is morality? What creates morality? Where does morality come from? What can I do? What can we do to guarantee that our children, our youth, that other 20-year-olds don't entertain this in a practical, real way? The last assassination attempt in the history of the United States was almost 50 years ago, 1981, Ronald Reagan. Some of you remember that, like I remember that. 1912, Teddy Roosevelt was wounded in an assassination attempt. 4 presidents of the U.S. were murdered, were assassinated. Abraham Lincoln, 1865. Garfield, 1881. McKinley, 1901. And of course, John F. Kennedy, 1963. And now the assassination attempt against Donald Trump. It's this question of morality that our founding fathers had to grapple with. On July 4th, 1776, when they made this bold experiment of the United States of America to ask this question, what will inspire, what will motivate people to be civil, to be kind, to be human and decent towards each other? Is it just police enforcement? That's a factor. Good police enforcement, good law enforcement, good security service, obviously. Is it knowing who gets a gun can be helpful? Is it giving people the right medications when they need it? All very, very important things. But ultimately, what about the internal psyche and makeup of a young man and woman? And let's not kid ourselves. Look what this 20-year-old almost accomplished and almost changed history. He already changed history, but he almost changed it in another way. If Trump wouldn't have turned his face, maybe a 0.5 millimeter, 1 millimeter, he would have been killed. All of history would have been quite metamorphosized at that moment. It was already affected quite deeply. And then I remembered, what was the greatest, most cataclysmic event in the last century that together these two events brought forth the death of more than 100 million people, the greatest catastrophes in human history? It was the First World War, which ultimately led to the Second World War. The First World War had 20 million casualties, unheard of, 20 million dead people, another 21 million wounded. The Second World War, with the Holocaust, 85 million people lost their life, including a third of the Jewish nation, including 1.5 million Jewish children who died in gas chambers. Who triggered the First World War? You know who? A 19-year-old kid by the name of Gabriele Princip. When he pulled the trigger on Archduke Ferdinand, the heir of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and his wife, Sophia, in June 1914, a 19-year-old kid literally ushered in the First World War, then it was called the Great War, which led to the Second World War. Here was a 19-year-old, here's a 20-year-old. Wow, power does lay with the youth. But if such catastrophic power lays with a young person, lest nobody say that a young woman or man can't change the world in a positive and productive and meaningful way. So our founding fathers, in their Declaration of Independence, July 1776, understood something very powerful. That with all external motivations, precautions, barriers, fear of penalties, punishment, imprisonment, pleas, sentences, etc., courts, the deepest motivation will only come from within. And thus, they declared those very powerful words. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. And I emphasize the word created, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Note they put in the word Creator twice here in the same paragraph. All men created equal, endowed by their Creator. But this was not a religious republic. The whole point of the United States of America was there would be a separation of church and state. There would be the freedom of religion where each and every person can worship according to their own conviction and understanding. Thus, this country has been a blessing for so many of us and so many minorities, including the Jewish community. I could stand here with a yarmulke, as you may notice, and even some payas and a beard and a Jewish tie among my Japanese, American friends. And you even laugh at some of my jokes. And you forgive my Brooklyn accent. What did the founding fathers understand so well? They understood the following truth. And that is, that if dignity of life is rooted in personal taste, it is also so frail and flimsy and superficial. If what gives people the right to pursue happiness, the right for life, the right for liberty, it must come from a place that transcends any individual mind, any individual heart, even the heart and the vote of a nation. It must come from an absolute higher authority that transcends every country, every color, every race, every religion, every faith, every philosophy, every ethnic group. They understood, not only with the brilliance of their mind, with an IQ, but with a deep EQ, that when the conviction to respect the life, the dignity of another human being is rooted in the fact it's nice to be nice. Some 20-year-olds think it's not nice to be nice. They've heard rhetoric that this man will destroy the nation. Different cultures teach different things. We have different opinions. You say, well, it's not nice to kill. Well, look what happened in Germany. The most PhDs came out of Germany. The greatest scientists, the greatest musicians, the greatest philosophers. It did not stop them from sending 1.5 million little angelic children to the gas chambers and killing another 40 million people. Why? Because I choose who is vermin, who is not vermin, who is bacteria, who is not a bacteria. You have a mouse trap and I have a Jew trap. There's no absolute respect anymore, and therefore the founding fathers inculcate this. Of course, separation of church and state. Everyone is free to worship according to their religion, to define God according to an understanding based on their faith and their culture. But that the respect for life comes from a place that transcends any particular mind, any particular mood, any particular inclination, and even the majority of the state agreeing to it. One day, votes can change. One day, convictions can change. One day, look what happened here in a few years. Political climate can change. I would have never conceived in my worst dreams that our Ivy League universities, where you parents sweat away with sweat, blood, and tears to pay $400,000 tuition for 4 years in some of these Ivy League universities, should openly support Nazi-like Hamas murderers. Inconceivable. For a person like me, parents survived Stalin's gulag, other relatives survived Hitler's concentration camps. This is what the founding fathers understood. And it's rooted in that first moment. They were great students of the Bible. And they remembered those opening verses in Genesis. The human being, Adam and Eve, woman and man, were created in the divine image. Spilling the blood of another human being, Genesis says, is the worst act on earth because you killed a piece of God. You murdered the image of God. The revolution in that should not be underestimated. What the Bible was teaching humanity at that moment was, you may not be in my image. I may not be in your image. You may not look like me. You may think different than me. You may speak different than me. You may harbor different perspectives and opinions. You are not in my image. I am not in your image. But you're still in God's image. And I am in God's image. We encounter God in the face of a stranger. Our founding fathers knew well the 10 Commandments, which begin with the words, I am the Lord who has taken you out of Egypt. Do not murder. Do not steal. Do not commit adultery. Why do you need I am the God? Do not murder. Who disagrees? Well, Mr. Crooks disagrees. Trump, you can murder. Somebody else may think you can murder somebody on the other side. You can murder. If I don't agree with you, I can murder. I am the Lord your God who's telling you you're not murdering, and therefore it's absolute, unequivocal, non-negotiable, in all conditions, all times. What happened this last week in the United States of America, I believe, represents a historic opportunity for every father and mother, for every teacher and educator, for every politician, essayist, business person, every lay leader and every simple person, men, women, and youth from the entire political and ideological spectrum, to come back to the DNA of the United States of America. Because if Mr. Crooks, when he went up to the roof, saw that there were 3 Secret Service people surrounding him with guns pointed to him, he would never do it. He did see a policeman coming up, but he pointed a gun and the man fell, the man went down, and that's when he had his opportunity to take a shot. But what if Mr. Crooks and thousands and thousands and thousands of our youth, everywhere in the country and everywhere in the world, would deep down be educated from day one that somebody is looking. Somebody does see me. There is an eye that sees and an ear that hears. Somebody is looking. Somebody does know everything I do and I say. The creator of the world is looking, is seeing. He will hold me accountable and responsible. He conceived the world in love and asks one thing: be kind to each other, be respectful to each other, be civil to each other, even if you disagree with every fiber of your being. The dignity of life is absolute. You were created in my image, not in anybody else's image. And there's no negotiations. It's a creator. Once it's a creator, you can't say, well, we have this color, we're more intelligent, we have a greater IQ, we're the majority, we have the money, we have the power. That's all if it's a right given by people. So the founding fathers said, don't make this right from people. People can cancel the right. It comes from the creator who transcends everyone and includes everyone. If every kid knows this, deep down, God cares about what you do. He knows what you do. Then I realized that's why the schools that the money is going to, tonight's money, are schools of Jewish education. I want to tell you an interesting secret. I believe in America today, there is not a single school that doesn't have a metal detector. For good reason. After Sandy Hook, after Columbine, after the shootings in so many schools, 24 babies, kids shot in their mouth. You remember Sandy Hook? By a loner. I know loners in my community. They don't shoot. They wouldn't kill a mosquito. It's about education values. So every school has a metal detector. I want to tell you something. There's one demographic, you could test this, you don't have to believe me. Ralph will agree. There's one demographic that I know in America. There's hundreds and thousands of schools, there's no metal detectors there. And those are the schools you're supporting tonight, Jewish schools. You know why? Because from the milk of our mothers, we have been taught, every Jewish child, this is the foundation of foundations, that the most important thing that God wants from you is values, character. Make a lot of money, be powerful, take over the world, suck the marrow out of life, make a difference. But the most important thing is your values, your character. One day you're going to be accountable to the creator of the world. Values are not only taught, they're caught like a cold. Values are ingrained in the DNA. We stopped talking about values. You're not allowed to talk about values anymore in America. And this has nothing to do with you're a Republican or a Democrat. You want to vote for Trump, you want to vote for somebody else. You believe in this policy or in that policy. This is back to the DNA of what made this country an amazing country, because getting rid of this is what we are seeing now. There is no respect. There's ultimately everybody can do whatever they want. If I decide you're evil, this one says I can do this one feels I can do this, and one 20-year-old goes and does it. And it's a climate that has contaminated our discourse from the youngest age to the oldest, and it has cost many, many, many young lives, especially in schools, shopping centers around the country. People don't even see it as big news when they see, oh, there was a shooting, 6 people were killed. There was a shooting, 6 people were killed. Oh, there was a school shooting, 2 children were killed. Next, 2 children were killed in a school? 2 children, by whom? By somebody who graduated the school, was a loner. They're saying that Crooks was bullied. Okay, I was also bullied, by the way. Maybe I should kill all of you. It's a great moment. I was also bullied. I know, Ralph, you were bullied? No, you were good at basketball. I wasn't. He was good at basketball. Still good at basketball. Today I'm better already. Bullying is a horrible thing. I speak a lot about bullying, but I won't kill anybody. First of all, I'm scared of my wife. That's the first thing, right? Right after God. There's God, there's my wife, my mother-in-law. I'm just joking. When there's values, I have in a family, I have someone who's Down syndrome. I have a close child in my community, autistic. Serious mental challenges. They don't hurt a fly because from the milk of their mother, they were ingrained with these values. And friend, I want to tell you there's another casualty in all of this. You know, people always talk about, we need civil discourse. Biden spoke on Sunday, President Biden, how we have to remove the toxicity of our language, not be so inflammatory and negative and toxic. Beautiful ideas. But I want to ask you a question. Why should my discourse be civil? Why should I respect my political or ideological opponent? Why? Well, it's nice. I don't want to be nice. I feel this is right. And here we go back to the same issue we have been avoiding in our schools and in our homes. Civil discourse is because you were created in God's image. And when I'm looking at you, I'm looking at God's image. And when I'm looking at you, I'm looking at God's image. This is an inspiring thought. Children will gravitate to this. So people say, oh, you want to turn America into an Orthodox Jewish shul? No. Heaven forbid. First of all, the herring is not healthy, the cholent is not healthy, the kishka is not healthy. Stay away. Go to the gym Saturday morning, it's fine. I'll go Sunday, you go Saturday, it's fine. You go to church Sunday, I'll go to the gym on Sunday. I stay away from the jalapeno herring. I like the Japanese food better. That's why I'm here. I heard there was a good Japanese dinner. Ralph is a nice guy. I came for dinner. My wife makes healthy food. This is almost healthy. This is not about turning America into a religious Christian state, but this is giving America back the gift of knowing that the source of morality must come from an absolute higher authority, and that every child needs to learn that. And there's one more big casualty here, and that is one more thing that has been sacrificed is truth. Do you know, people don't trust doctors anymore. They don't trust scientists anymore. They don't trust physicists anymore. They don't trust biologists anymore. But what's there not to trust? I understand politics, philosophy, but when you're talking about science, biology, medicine, these seems to be at least exact sciences. At least it's an attempt for some exact science. Why not? You know what happened? Something very tragic happened in America. I look how Israel was treated since October 7th, and I realized what else was sacrificed on the altar of truth. And that is truth itself. I didn't know why. How can intelligent people, professor graduates, PhDs, deny truth? You're entitled to your own opinions, as Senator Monian said, but not to your own facts. But today you're entitled to your own facts. And then I realized there's a verse in Psalms. I realized American youth supporting Hitler, Osama bin Laden, Nasrallah, Sinwar, Hamas. I mean, the Me Too movement could not condemn the raping. I don't know if you saw the videos, what Hamas did to Jewish women. In the middle of raping a woman, beheading her. How could you not condemn it? Doesn't mean you agree with Israel on everything. And then I realized there's a verse in Psalms. Reshit Chachma Yirat Hashem. The genesis of wisdom is the awe of God. The genesis of wisdom is respect for God. The moment there's no concept of truth, everything is relative. What is truth? Who even says there's truth? You think based on your prejudice. I think based on my prejudice. Because the moment there's no one reality, the moment there's no absolute reality, the word truth is a myth. It's a fiction. So for thousands of years, humanity knew we need to strive for truth. We need to seek truth. We need to look for truth. We want to fight for truth. We want to discover truth. And then we created a generation that says, whatever you're feeling now, that's truth. And if tomorrow you want to change it, that's truth. And even science and physics, biology, medicine, facts on the ground news, doesn't mean anything. And there's no trust anymore. I know when I look at an article, there may be an absolute distortion of facts, not an interpretation that I disagree. An absolute distortion of facts. And it doesn't mean anything. And the fact that you're an academic and you spent 60 years in a university means that you're probably even more stupid. Or possibly more stupid, I should say. The moment we got rid of that creator completely, there's no higher authority, there's no truth, everything is relative. And it's unbelievable, because when that shuts down, you can't have discourse. You break down the fabric of family, of community. There's no loyalty, there's no truth, because there's nothing common that we're dedicated to. You're just dedicated to your feelings, I'm dedicated to my feelings, and when they clash, there's no limits. There's no limits on power. That's what we are seeing. This is God's wake-up call, in my opinion, to an entire nation, such a great nation, to reclaim its soul, its heart, its constitution, its Bill of Rights, its Declaration of Independence. It's what the Founding Fathers based this entire country on. My dearest brothers and sisters, friends, there was a family whose great-great-great-great-grandfather came here on the Mayflower. And the family was very proud of their lineage. And they hired a biographer to chronicle the history of this family. The lineage, and the biographer began to do research. And then he came to the family and he said, I have a horrible discovery that I have to share with you. I found out that your great-grandpa, Richard Smith IV, was a horrible criminal, a petty criminal. He was sentenced to death. He died on the electric chair. He was executed. So if this guy was living today, he would just make up a story or delete it. But unfortunately, he was living a few decades ago. You still had to keep to the truth. So he says, what do we want me to do? They said, oh my God, we can't embarrass the family. It's going to be horrible, but we want to write the book. He says, you know what? I'll figure it out. This is what you're paying me for. I'll figure it out. He writes the book. He gives it to the family. They open it up to this page about Grandpa Richard Smith IV. And this is what he says. This is how he writes it. Richard Smith IV occupied a very important chair in a central governmental institution. He remained tied down to his position with the strongest of cords until his last breath. Despite all of his attempts, he could not tear himself away from this important chair. His death came as a sudden shock. Friends, you have to know how to write a story. You have to know how to write a story. The story of Trump attempted assassination of Donald Trump. You have to know how to tell the story. The story could be told as just another insane, crazy Meshuggah who got up on a roof and tried to shoot a president-elect and killed someone. That's one story. It's true. The story can be told as a colossal failure of the Secret Service and law enforcement which is quite interesting what happened there. And I have my own speculations, but we're not going there tonight. The story can be told about what Democrats and others were saying about Donald Trump and what instigated this climate in the United States. There can be a story about him being bullied or being a loner. There can be a story about his father's rifle. A lot of different stories can be said. But I believe, friends, that the most profoundest and important story is this story. A wake-up call to a nation in a comatose state to reclaim its soul and its identity. Let me conclude with this little anecdote about a little girl who was standing at the shores of California, and as the tide was retreating and the starfish were being spit out, she felt so bad for these stranded starfish. And she lifted up starfish after starfish and threw them back into the water. And one old cynical man meets this girl and says, "You foolish little petty girl, this ocean, this beach stretches for dozens of miles. There are millions, tens of millions of fish stranded here. Even if you'll work a whole day, you will accomplish nothing. You are being ineffective. You are wasting your time. You're not making a difference." The little girl looked at him, picked up one little starfish, and as she cast it back into the water, she said, "For this one, I made all the difference." Friends, I don't know that any one person can change the entire world. Although my hunch tells me that sometimes a 19 or 20-year-old can. But one thing I know for sure about every single one of us sitting in this room, there is that starfish for whom I can make a difference. There is that youngster, that young man or woman, that young boy or girl, that young teenager, that young adult, that older person that I can make all the difference for by looking at their face and saying, "Wow, you're in the image of God." By waking up in the morning and asking not what everybody can do for me, but also asking what I can do for my family, for my friends, for my community, for my country, and for God's world. Thank you very much.
This class is brought to you by theyeshiva.net. Please help us continue the classes. Make even a small contribution at www.theyeshiva.net/donate.